It's time to open the grade book once again and review a season that was for Seth Jarvis.
You're Locked On Hurricanes, your daily podcast on the Carolina Hurricanes, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to a Thursday edition of Locked On Hurricanes, your team every day, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Thank you to the Everydayer for making this your first listen of the day. 5 days a week, Monday through Friday, talking everything about your Carolina Hurricanes. I'm your host, Zach Martin. I'm the Carolina Hurricanes beat writer over at the Hockey Writers. I also do some AHL coverage over at the Calder Times. I am the co-host of the Searchcast, which is a weekly Carolina Hurricanes podcast, along with all of my duties here at Locked On Hurricanes. Got a very exciting show for you guys on Thursday, just like we did on Tuesday, going over the season that was for Sebastian Aho. We are back again for part 2 of our off-season series, looking at every player's grades from the 23-24 season, and this time it is the breakout star that was Seth Jarvis. Going to go over his regular season as a whole, kind of look at how he did in the playoffs, and then talk about in the very last part of the show is going to be the grade that he got from the fans on social media, along with the grade that I gave him myself as well. But before we get into all of that, today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONAHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. So, like I said, we are going to go over the season it was for Seth Jarvis, and have a season, Seth. I mean, going into his third season in the league, it's something where you were excited to see how he does. Where he broke out very early at the age of 19 back in the 21-22 season. People were wondering, was he going to make the team out of camp for the Hurricanes? He just got drafted 13th overall in the 2020 in the draft, and you were kind of wondering, okay, what's that going to look like for him? He was the 13th overall pick of the 2020 draft, and you were going to see where he was going to be at when it came time. And, they were going to give him the first 10 games of the regular season and see how he did. And, lo and behold, you saw how good he was. The fact that he stayed with the Hurricanes and played that 21-22 season. He played 68 games, had 17 goals, 23 assists for 40 points. And you will gladly take that for your first season with the team. Follows it up with the sophomore season of 22-23, where he did get 39 points, 14 goals, 25 assists. Did play in all 82 games for the first time in his career. And then this past season, have a breakout year, Mr. Seth Jarvis. 33 goals, 34 assists for 67 points, essentially plus 23. Played in 81 games. He actually could have played all 82 games for back-to-back seasons, but the Hurricanes held him out for the last game of the season against the Columbus Blue Jackets to give him a day off. He actually finished the season with 13 power play goals, which led the team through the regular season. Also had 2 shorthanded goals, 9 game-winning goals. That was second on the team behind Sebastian Aho. He averaged 18 minutes and 45 seconds, which was the most of his career to that point, and had 176 shots on goal, which is actually just 9 short of the total that he had last year. And he actually had a pretty good face-off percentage this year. Used him a lot on the face-off dot. He won 157, did lose 195, but did finish with a 44.6, which is the best of his career. Threw 115 hits, and he's someone that's not afraid to throw the body around, for the fact that even for a guy of his stature, where you're looking at someone who on paper is, 5'10", 175, really good right-hand shot, right wing. And, that's, someone for his stature, not afraid to throw the body. And he did actually have 52 blocks as well. So all in all, what a phenomenal season by Seth Jarvis. And the fact that you come out and do what you did in the regular season. And if you go look at the playoffs, we'll talk about that a little bit more later on. You did have 9 points in 11 games played, but talk about a season where, some people thought he had a sophomore slump. Okay, he played in more games, did finish 1 point less. And I've said on the show, and I've even said it on the other podcast, the Searchcast, where it was clear from what he's even said and what Brind'amour said, the fact that his second season in the league last year for 22-23. It was a lot more of getting his defensive side of the game down. He made himself become a 200-foot player, a great two-way player, and someone that could use the whole ice and be able to be used in any type of situation. And that's kind of what you saw, this past season for 23-24, and why it made him such a complete player. And to where you see why he had 13 power play goals, 9 game winners, and 2 shorthanded goals as well. Brind'amour used Seth Jarvis a lot through pretty much any type of situation: power play, penalty kill, even strength, offensive, defensive, neutral zone. No matter where the Hurricanes were at in any type of situation, it seemed like that Brind'amour used Seth Jarvis almost in any type of situation, and it worked. And that's why you kind of saw the season that he had, where you go completely off. You have career highs in goals. His previous best was 17 back in 21-22. His best assist total was 25 in 22-23, and the points total goes back to his rookie season. This year, absolutely obliterates his goal total with 33, gets 34 assists. And the fact that you look at a 27-point difference from his rookie year to where he was now, and for the fact that he only had 2 power play goals and 4 game winners in his rookie season, you fast forward to where he has 13 power play goals, the most in one season for him. 2 shorthanded, which was better than the previous best, which was the year before, where he had 1. And didn't even have any game-winning goals his second year in the NHL, but ended up with having 9, which was the most. And he just goes to show of, the fact that how good he was for his shooting percentage. Even his shooting percentage was really high. He had 15.5 his rookie year, 7.5 in 22-23, then a staggering 18.8 for his shot percentage. Seth Jarvis is not afraid to shoot the puck. You clearly saw that, and just even for the fact in the playoffs too, he led the entire team in the playoffs, which we'll talk about in the second segment. But for a season that he had, and even when you look back at his exit interviews, and we'll go over more of that as well in the third segment, for the fact that he talked about where he tore his labrum and had a torn rotator cuff and still did what he did. It goes to show that, like, for a season where you saw guys like, Sebastian Aho kind of give a slow start, or you had, Teuvo Teravainen and Jesper Kotkaniemi leading the way early for the team when the team was overall somewhat struggling. But if you look back and, they kind of, slowed down as the season went along. But if you look at the general whole of the team, it seemed like the most consistent guy for the Carolina Hurricanes was Seth Jarvis. Yes, he did finish 20 points behind Sebastian Aho, but you're looking at someone who's, it was his third season in the league. He just got done with his, ELC this past season, and he's coming up on, where you're looking at the 13th overall pick in the 2020 draft. He's only 22. He is arbitration eligible with additional, pro season, but he just finished a year where he had, he made $1.394 million. That was his AAV, and his cap hit was only $894,000. And now he's a restricted free agent, and it comes into the point of his career where what type of contract do you give him? Do you give him a 2-3 year bridge deal, or do you go and give him the 6, 7, 8 year contract? And what does that number total even look like? You could look at an AAV of $6 to $8 million, depending on if you want to give him the Brinks truck, or do you want to give him that bridge and make it to where he's 25 or 26, and that's kind of where Sebastian Aho got his new 8-year deal that just kicks in too, for the 24-25 season. Do you give him that short bridge that goes into Sebastian Aho at age territory, or do you give him a contract that in the age range of Jesper Kotkaniemi, Andrei Svechnikov, and just making an 8-year deal and run with it? If there's anyone on the team right now that deserves an 8-year contract, it's Seth Jarvis, because you talk about a guy who really broke it out in the scene in the NHL. He's on almost every podcast in terms of hockey. He's on NHL Network. He's NHL.com. Like, he's just featured all over the place, and that's just kind of what you saw. And you look at how he was, his personality shines through so much. like when, the voting was opening for the All-Star game, Seth Jarvis is like, sorry, I already got my trip booked to Mexico and that's not refundable. I'm going. So even with the fans wanting to give him there for the fan vote, he's like, I appreciate it, but I'm going on vacation. And even on vacation too, you see he's like, hanging out with the guy, just Barracuda and Yami, Terravine and all that. And then, they're just, he's like, oh, I got to deal with this heat. And then he's like holding him a beer can to his face and he's trying to cool off. And then they come back from vacation. They ask him, oh, how was it, drinking beer and stuff? He goes, oh, I don't drink beer. it's just his personality is so great. And that just shows like, the fact that he even stated like, yeah, I try to be a little bit more quiet, which is surprising if you've seen how Seth Jarvis has been, and the fact that now he's like, oh yeah, I step on everyone's feet now. I don't even worry about stepping on toes. I step on feet, and it just seems like the guys on the team love him, and that's why you see how his personality is as a person, and the fact that how he's grown so much in the NHL. And you saw at the exit interviews at the end of the season with Rod Brind'amour and now the former president and general manager John Waddell. They love Seth Jarvis. They love what he can do, and the fact that the thing that Rod loves about him is the fact that he had a great season, but he's always willing to grow and willing to get better. So you're talking about a guy who's only 22 years old, had a career year where you're looking at 33. He's a 30 goal scorer, 67 points. Like he was 3 short of hitting 70. Some of us think it'd be great if he hit 60. He almost hit 70. And, that was with him, starting the season, on the first line. Then, later on the year, after they get, Jake Gentz and all that, they see him go back to the third line with Jordan Stahl and Jordan Martinook. And instantly those guys start, racking up the points too with just having him there. He's someone who's only 5'10", but isn't afraid to throw a body, isn't afraid to crash in that. He's got speed. He's got the Energizer Bunny speed where it's like you can't slow him down. Throws the hit, scores the goals, gets in the dirty areas. He's turned himself into probably one of the most underrated and probably going to be one of those breakout two-way forwards, 200-foot guys that's just going to be an absolute menace on the ice for the Hurricanes. And I don't think there's any doubt that Seth Jarvis is going to be, he's going to be with the Hurricanes for a long time. It's just now it comes down to what type of contract you want to go with. Like I said, do you go with the bridge or do you go with the longer contract? And for me, it's like you kind of want to give him that longer contract just for the fact that if you look at just the normal, I guess, we were talking about Corsi for Sebastian Aho. Seth Jarvis this past season in the 23-24 season, he had a 60% Corsi for, which goes back to if it's above 50%, this means the team has control of the puck more often than not when this player is on the ice in all situations. And that's how Seth Jarvis was. He was a 60% this past season. Even the 22-23 season, he was a 62.4. So not so much of a drop, not a huge drop off. Was still a 60. So you'll definitely love to see that for a guy like Seth Jarvis. And if you look at the ozone starts and defense starts, the 2 previous seasons, his rookie year and his sophomore year, you're looking at 64.5 and a 63. But he had a 53.3% of offensive zone starts. You're like, well, why is there such a drop off? Well, if you look at where his defensive zone starts were, and you're talking like, offensive zone faceoffs, plus defensive zone faceoffs, and where they took place on the ice with defensive zone starts in all situations. His rookie season was only 35.5, and then his 22-23 season was at 37%. So you see where like he was used a lot more on the offensive side of the puck in terms of faceoffs. But if you look to this past season where, like I said, he had a 53.3, but it's like, okay, why is that so much lower compared to what it was before? Was because he had a 46.7% start in the defensive zone. So yeah, that's why you see such a difference where it's okay. He was used a lot more in the offensive zone for a lot of the starts, the last couple of seasons. And that's where you kind of see where his sophomore season he started focusing on his defense, trying to become that two-way 200-foot player. And you see the rewards of that work they put in his sophomore year. He even said at the end of the 22-23 season, he wanted to, get bigger. He wanted to get more physical. He wanted to add muscle and not get pushed around. And you saw that. He did not get pushed around at all through the 23-24 season. in all that work that he did to get his defensive game better. That's why you see his defensive percent of where the faceoffs were go up so much. And that's kind of what leads him to have a breakout season in the regular season and what he did in the postseason. And, for the postseason, we're definitely going to talk about that here because that's, breakout regular season. But the playoffs, he basically just continued where he left off in the regular season. And we'll talk about his playoff performance here in a second on a Thursday edition of Locked On Hurricanes. Game Time makes getting NBA Finals tickets even faster and easier. Prices on the Game Time app actually go down the closer it gets to the tip-off. With killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their lowest price guarantee, Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying NBA tickets. The one thing I really like about the Game Time app is you get their last-minute tickets, you get your flash deals and your zone deals, and plus the views from your seat at the venue itself. With their last-minute deals, you can actually save up to 60% off buying last minute for sports, concerts, comedy theaters, and so much more. With their flash deals, you can save even more with exclusive in-app deals on select seats ahead of the game or even the certain events outside of just sports. And the good thing about the fact that with their zone deals, you can save more on that side of too is if all you do is choose the section, but you let the Game Time app choose the seat for you. And when it comes to the seats, one of the great features that I really enjoy is the fact that you get a panoramic view from their Seat View finder, and the fact that you see where you're on the app, you see what your sight lines are, so you're not worried about obstructed views or poles being in your way and all that stuff before you even buy the tickets itself. So make sure to download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNHL. That's LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Welcome back to segment 2 of Locked On Hurricanes, your team every day. So like I said, how we talked about at the end of segment 1, did a lot of his regular season stuff and just how he, a lot of personality stuff too, and just how his third overall regular season was just absolutely phenomenal for the Carolina Hurricanes. And we teased about talking about the playoffs next, and now we really get into the good stuff that is for what Seth Jarvis did for the Carolina Hurricanes in the postseason. So he did finish 3 points behind, team leader in Sebastian, who did have 12. But he did lead the team in goals with 5 for the playoffs, which matched his playoff best last year for the 22-23 season, where he did finish with 5 goals, 5 assists for 10 points in 15 games, getting to the Eastern Conference Final. This time they only made it to the second round, but still being able to put up 9 points, 11 games, you really can't ask much for more out of Seth Jarvis. Finished with a +2, and did have 2 power play goals. While the team did struggle overall in the power play for, definitely the second round of the playoffs against the Rangers. They did have a really good power play in the first round against the New York Islanders. Indeed, did have 25 shots on goal, a little bit less than his usual, where he had 37 and 32 the last 2 seasons. But his shooting percentage, 20%, a lot. That's his career best in terms of the playoffs, where he had 20%. His next best was 13.5. And even looking at the ice time, the season before for 22-23, he had 19.55 this past season for 23-24 in the playoffs, over 20 and a half minutes, and his faceoff percentage 39.3. So it dropped a little bit less, but he was actually used a lot more on the faceoffs than he usually is, where he had like 2 last season. He had like 4 faceoffs last year for the playoff, this 22-23 season for the playoffs, but this one, for 23-24, he actually had, he won 11, lost 17, but a big jump in terms of his overall uses of the faceoffs and all that stuff like that. And he did, like I said, he threw the body in the regular season, threw the body once again in the playoffs, had 27 hits, and did have 11 blocked shots. But overall, there's not really much more you can ask out of Seth Jarvis for the fact of how you saw him in the playoffs. Yes, he didn't lead the team in playoffs like Sebastian Aho did, but you're still talking top 3 in terms of he finished with 9, but led the team in goals. Did have 2 power play goals, and it just goes to show that he's still someone that he's still growing in his game. He's still really young. He's only 22. If you look at guys in their quote unquote primes, a lot of people are saying it's like 25, 26 is when you go into your prime, and you're kind of out of it by like 29, 30, 31, depending on who you are. Sometimes there's some guys who can stretch their prime out to 32, 33. So you're still talking, Seth Jarvis is still 3 or 4 years away from hitting his prime time, like where his game really gets to. And how he did in the regular season and the playoffs already shows that he's on a good trajectory of his game is just going to keep getting better. And you look at how he did in the playoffs, really huge moments for the Hurricanes. Like I said, a couple of huge power play goals, 5 overall. That was the best on the team. And that's coming off a regular season where you had 33. And it just seemed like it was a seamless transition for Seth Jarvis, where he goes into a great regular season and then comes into the playoffs and just keeps motoring on, still doing what he does best. And that's why you saw where he was able to capitalize on the opportunities and show that where he was overall as a player, and the fact that kept showing Rod Brind'amour why he can trust him, and he essentially did. And that's something that's really good to see from, where you look at a guy like Seth Jarvis, who's still considered a younger player, where comparative to almost everyone else on the roster, we're looking at guys who are like 25 to, somewhere in their 30s, depending on who you ask, where you're looking at. So for the fact that Seth had himself a career year in his third year, which makes things interesting for the Carolina Hurricanes, is the fact that he's going into the off season as a restricted free agent with some arbitration stuff coming up within the next year or so, and you have to ask yourself, like, what type of contract do you want to give? And if you ask me, I think it's one of those deals where it is I would say lock him up sooner rather than later. And, if you give him that 8-year deal, give him an AAV that, matches what he is and maybe what he could be. Because you can see what it is. Now, if you want to be a little bit more safe and do the bridge and see where he's at, given, 2 or 3 more seasons, where if you're looking at 3 years down the road, you're looking at him at 25, and like Sebastian Aho's 29, and Andrei Svechnikov and Jesperi Kotkaniemi, they're still like, they're going to be like in their, late 20s. That's still a good window to have Seth Jarvis in too. So it does make things very interesting. But if you look at a regular season in the playoffs that he had, I really don't know how much more you can be like, okay, we still need to see more out of this guy. I think right now you saw what you have, but if you want to play a little bit more on the safe side, okay, keep proving yourself. You had a really great, third season in the league. Can you do it again? See some consistency of like, okay, can you go and put up another upper end 60s? Do you hit 70 points next season? And it's curious to see where the Hurricanes play him, because, like I said, he played first line for a good part of the season, and then later on he played a lot of third line minutes with the Jordans. And now with question marks surrounding if Jake Gensel comes back, if Martin Nietzsche's is coming back, even though he's an RFA, do you possibly see, Seth Jarvis going into the top 6 a lot more? Or do you see him kind of being around in the middle 6, or he just kind of fluctuates back and forth, where it's like, do you consider him as a top 9 guy, but it's not that moniker of, oh, okay, well, he's just top 9, but he can play in all 3 forward lines as that top 9 guy, where he's just so versatile they can throw him anywhere. And of course, he could play on the power play and the penalty kill as well. So it's like, no matter where he's at, Seth Jarvis is going to get his ice time, and that's why you saw such a huge increase, is the fact that his ice time went up, his points went up. So if he keeps getting those consistent minutes and those same opportunities next season, like he did for 23-24, I wouldn't be surprised if you see a 24 or 25 season where Seth Jarvis does hit 70 points and maybe more, and continues that run, and just see where he goes into the playoffs next year. And who knows where he's at. Maybe he is chasing Sebastian Aho for the most points on the team. Maybe do you see him getting 35, 40 goals next year? It's very, very likely. But we are going to talk about his grades, that what he got from social media and the grade that I gave him as well for the 23-24 season, and just some other aspects of why those certain grades mattered because of the stuff that he did that no one really even knew about for most of the season. So we'll get to that here in a second on a Thursday edition of Locked On Hurricanes. Welcome back to segment 3 of Locked On Hurricanes, your team every day. So we are coming to the portion of the show now where we're talking about the grade. We talked about his regular season, we talked about his playoffs, and just overall encompassing of how much he's grown as a person that is Seth Jarvis. So just like for Sebastian Aho, went to social media, wanted to see what people's grades were. And, he got more. There was a lot. He had 4 more votes total, but the percentages are very, very interesting. Where you look at Sebastian Aho, who, in terms of his vote, he had 90 total votes for his poll, but he finished with 66% for the A. And this one, Seth Jarvis, 94 votes. He finished with a 90% with an A. Now, I know some people have, all good with some, people having opinions and stuff like that. I'm really curious, though, about 10% gave him a B. And I'm curious to see why a B, just for the fact that you look at the fact that you had a career year, led the team in goals in the playoffs, had 2 power play goals. I'm really curious to see why some people gave him a B. That's kind of a little bit surprising to me. I figure he might be like 95, 96, maybe hitting 98% in terms of an A. So for the fact he finished with 90% as an A, which is still good. I mean, obviously, he had a career year. You can't, I don't know how much more you can ask out of this guy for his 3rd season in the league after finishing with 39 the year before. But having a B, I'm really curious to see what people's answers were in terms of that. So do you think that the A should have been higher? Like I thought for, Sebastian Aho, but let me know what you think if you're on the YouTube, leave it in the comments below. Let me know what you think, or if you're on social media, if you're someone who gave him a B, or, do you think that he deserved a B? Let me know why you think that grade. But if you think it should be an A, where do you think the A should have been? Do you think it should have been higher than 90, or do you think 90 is kind of about right? For me, I would thought it would be about 95 at the least. But overall, the fans got this one right. It's definitely an A. Like I said, you give him a career year where he goes absolutely off. 33 goals, 34 assists, 67 points. You thought he was going to hit 70. He had 13 power play goals, which led the entire team. Had 9 game winners, which was only 1 back of Sebastian Aho. 2 shorties, ties Jacob Slavin. Led the team in power play goals with 5. Had 5 goals, 2 power play goals in the postseason. If you ask me, I give him an A+, and that's what I'm going to go with. I know for the fans, it's like, okay, it's an A, it's a B, it's a C. For me, the executive decision is I'm giving him an A+. You can't, like I said, you look at the season that he had in his 3rd year in the league, and has a career season, has a great playoff run too on top of that, and the fact he did all of this with a torn labrum and a torn rotator cuff, and he did that for after game, I think he said it was against the Flyers, so it was game 15, I think. He still played over 60 games with a torn rotator cuff and a torn labrum, and he broke his finger in the first round of the playoffs against the Islanders. So the fact that they asked him, why'd you keep playing through instead of getting rest? I didn't want to miss any time. I didn't want to miss, the magic of what this team had. It goes to show how much guts this kid has, where it's tough just in general to move your arm at all to do basic necessities with a torn rotator cuff and a torn labrum. He went and played 60 games in a regular season and 11 games in the playoffs and broke his finger at the same time with having a rotator cuff and a labrum that were also torn. So just like Don Waddell said in the end of season press conference, that kid has some cojones, and they're huge for the fact of a season that he had. So big props to Seth Jarvis. The fans got it right. He deserves an A. I'm giving him an A+. A+ is you have to have a spectacular season for me to give you an A+. You could say Sebastian Aho could have gotten it, but it's Sebastian Aho. We know he's the superstar. He's the guy who's going to get those points and stuff like that. No one really knew what, like, you knew Seth Jarvis was going to have a great season with the Hurricanes, but to have a career that he did, have a great playoff run, and be able to do this with basically a body that was just trying to stay healthy, quote unquote, while having injuries on top of that. Yeah, I wouldn't even say fully healthy. It's just kind of like he showed that he was healthy, but he wasn't. He literally played with torn ligaments and just torn muscles and everything else. So yeah, like I think he's probably gonna be the only guy that's gonna get an A+. I could be wrong depending on looking at the rest of the roster, but right now Seth Jarvis is a bona fide A+ player from the 23-24 season, in my opinion. That's just how good he was. So if you're on YouTube, let me know in the comments. Do you think he deserves an A? Do you think he does get that A+? Because that for what season he had, I think it's more than well deserved for him to get that A+. But what grade would you give him? Like I said, if you're on YouTube, leave it in the comments. Let me know what you think about that too. And if you're on social media and you didn't vote, and when I drop the graphics and all that stuff from the grades, let me know. Do you agree with the A+, or do you think an A is a more reasonable factor, or do you think you get a different grade? But yeah, Seth Jarvis, A+, certified, stamp it. That dude had a great season. There's nothing more you can ask out of him. And I'm really hoping he gets a huge contract from the Carolina Hurricanes, because this kid, that Seth Jarvis, make him a Carolina Hurricane for life. That's all I got to say, because he's going to be one of those guys that's going to have a really great career here in Carolina. Of course, everyone loves him, and he loves to be in Carolina with all the guys too. So big props to Seth Jarvis for a great season, regular season, playoffs, and all that stuff. Hopefully very, very soon we get a longer playoff run for him and get to see him lift the Stanley Cup. Yeah, hopefully very, very soon. But I hope everyone enjoyed this episode of Locked On Hurricanes. This will wrap up the episode. If you want to stay up to date with me, you can follow me on X, Twitter, wherever you want to call it, at Once You're Zach. The podcast is LO_Hurricanes. If you click the link tree in my bio, you can check out where you can find all my newsletters and all of my articles at the Hackers. I just hit 100 articles most recently, doing a lot of draft prospect stuff. So if you want to keep up with anything in terms of Hurricanes in the draft, what potential targets could be for the Hurricanes, make sure to go over to the Hackers and check that out. If you want to follow my American Hockey League coverage at the Calder Times, there's a link for that too. If you want to listen or watch my other podcast, the Surgecast, there's links to the podcast platforms and YouTube on that side of things. If you want to listen to this podcast on all podcast platforms, we do have links to any type of platform that does carry the show. If you leave a 5-star rating and a review, I will read it on the show and help grows the podcast as well. If you're on the YouTube side of things, make sure to subscribe, hit the bell notification, and make sure to turn on all so you don't miss a show. Hit the thumbs up button to let me know what you think about the show. And like I said in the comments, leave your grade. And do you agree with the A+, or where do you think Seth Jarvis should be graded on his 23-24 season? If you share the show with other Caniacs, hopefully they become everydayers just like you. We are over 870 subscribers. We are on the road to 1,000. And if we get to 1,000, I might just do something special for you guys. But like I said, I hope everyone enjoyed this Thursday edition of Locked On Hurricanes. This was part 2 of our 23-24 season grades. Hope everyone's liking this series. And we're going to be back doing our prospect profile for Friday. I'm super excited to get back on that once again. I hope everyone has a great rest of their Thursday. And until next time, as always, let's go Canes.